It can sometimes seem as though pretty much everything is turning into software, and there's a famous New York Times column about this, written by Mark Andreessen, and we call it sort of the digitalization of everything. Those things that really matter to us, those things that really matter to human beings, whether it's art, whether it's how we get around, how we communicate, whether it's the right time to starting to build a family. The sorts of technologies that make a difference to how people live are the ones that really excite me. And so I'm very, very fortunate to share with you some stories from some really terrific entrepreneurs. The first one I would like to introduce to you is Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's a long way to come, and we're grateful to you for being here.
I slept all afternoon. It was great.
Terrific. Let's get straight down into a subject that I know you speak about a lot, and that's regulation. And inevitably, with companies that are trying to make radical differences to everyday things, you encounter entrenched interests, right?
Yeah.
Now, we spoke on the phone the other day, and you told me that the latest installment of this, from Uber's point of view, is happening in Milan at the moment. Could you tell us about this?
Well, look, we've been in Europe since December 2011. Paris was the first city we launched in Europe. It's because it's our oldest city, it's our biggest one. And until very recently, we just haven't had the regulatory issues in Europe that we had very quickly in the U.S. But I think some of that good luck streak is it's getting a little shakier.
People expect it to be the other way around, don't they?
They do.
You imagine I certainly imagine America to be this sort of glorious libertarian utopia.
Right.
But in fact, you move to California and you find out, you can't walk on certain bits of the pavement or whatever. But so you're experiencing this trouble in Europe now.
Yeah, people do not realize that certain industries in the States are protected in a way that's, it can only be described as grotesque, extremely anti-competitive, and it goes counterintuitive to sort of conventional wisdom, but it's true. What we saw in Milan on Friday, this is just literally a few days ago, our head of operations, Ryan Graves, as well as our general manager of Milan, a girl named Benedetta, we're basically getting interviewed at a Wired conference, right? And the taxi industry basically had a bunch of taxi drivers blockade the entrance to the conference. So you couldn't actually get in through the front entrance. The only way to get into this conference was basically through the side, and they packed more than half of the people that were in attendance were taxi drivers screaming and yelling. They couldn't actually do the interview. It ultimately ended up in Q&A, but with all the screaming that was going on, sort of got cut short. There were dozens of articles written on it, but that was our welcome into Milan. We're doing quite well there, but we've been there a few months and it's already starting to get heated.
Are you finding that the drivers kind of split into kind of the entrepreneurial camp, where they're sort of willing to give this a go and try to provide a better service for their customers, or they're terrified of anybody else coming in and it's weird, isn't it? Like in all these businesses, you get this sort of like 50-50 split of people who are get it or don't.
Well, typically, Uber is supported by drivers and driver unions and things like this. And the reason why is because we're an option for them to make a living. In so many cities around the world, they only have one way to make a living, and because of that, it's a really bad one because they have no option. So just like riders in many cities can get screwed because they don't have a way to get around the city, the drivers, if they don't have an alternative to make a living, they get screwed by the taxi industry. So in most cities around the world, the drivers love us because this is another way to make a living. It's usually a far better, more lucrative way to put food on the table for their family and ultimately to grow their own business. So we haven't had as many issues with drivers specifically, though quite often when we're new to a city, there can be some apprehension, and we have to get on the streets and sort of educate on what we're about. And we like to say we give riders high fives, we give drivers hugs, and they have to feel those hugs. You know, they have to sort of understand what the model could mean for them.
Yeah, I mean, Rupert Murdoch has this famous phrase, like the only thing that separates rich people from poor people these days is like their mode of transport, right? Like how they get around and where they go on holiday. I mean, you know, you perceived as a luxury service at the beginning, but you're now starting to do these sort of different kinds of diffusion services effectively, right?
Sure.
So
That's an interesting quote.
Right. I mean, but the more you think about it, the more you realize it's true. It's like actually, you know, you can pretty much do everything these days except, you know, first class tickets are fucking expensive.
Yeah,
I mean, do you feel like you're going some of the way to breaking down that last kind of that last imbalance?
I think one of the things that Uber does that has captured people's imaginations is that it's a high-end service, right? A high-end brand that's going to the masses, right? We like to say we're everyone's private driver, so that everybody should have a private driver ultimately, especially when there's driverless cars. But that's a little bit further out there.
The VIPs in the front section have all had your private drivers, for which we're very grateful. Thank you.
Fair enough.
This week, yeah, but it's been a treat.
So, you know, there's sort of like what I like to say in cities that are very political, like Washington, D.C., where we've had a number of situations come up. I like to call what Uber's doing a populist limo movement, which is almost a contradiction in terms, but it is what we do. And because of that, it captures people's imaginations, right? Is that it's high-end, but it's accessible. We're offering lower cost options as well. UberX is one of them. We also do taxis in a number of cities. And there's just a really interesting thing that happens when you can make something that was previously inaccessible accessible, but still give that high-end feel to it.
I suppose it's kind of it's like the car industry catching up with aviation. You know, you have premium economy, where, you know, that sort of that mastige brand kind of space in the middle of the plane. It's something similar to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a nice ride. I mean, we've got a bunch of partners, and their vehicles are out here in Berlin. You guys should give it a shot if you haven't. Yeah. It's kind of nice.
Let me ask you one more thing, because I'm fascinated by this. You know, booking a cab, like you would think it's a pretty easy thing to do. I don't really care if I have to wait 2 minutes or 10 minutes, but your objective is that I don't wait more than, 5 minutes or something?
Yeah,
like that?
That's sort of like the benchmark, but I think in the older cities, and we're still under 3 years old, but in our older cities, you know, you're looking at average pickup times of like 2 minutes and 40 seconds.
So, just briefly, can you explain, I mean, I've heard you speak previously about how staggeringly complex the algorithms are that go on behind the scenes, and we don't need to get too technical, but like what kinds of, I mean, you have to take into account, I guess, the weather and events, and I mean, like, how complicated is it really to, like, you know, to have to run a taxi booking service?
Look, if you have 10,000 cars sitting in a city with no demand, you're going to have 10-second pickup times because you'll have a car at every corner. But when you have a lot of demand, that's when it gets interesting. When you have drivers that actually want to make a living, that's when it gets interesting, right? So the taxi drivers here in Berlin make something like, you know, 4 or 5 euro an hour. That's not a real living, right? So you can oversupply a place, but then one side of the equation is not getting a good deal. And so you have to use math to make sure that the pickup times stay low and the utilization stays high. And the best way to think about that is, you know, think of like a plane, right? A two-dimensional plane. Let's just call it a map. Let's say of Berlin or any city for that matter. What you have is demand, let's say in the next 20 minutes, has a curve to it. Who's requesting and where, right? We're predicting ahead of time what that curve looks like, and then have tools so that we can position supply, essentially the cars and the drivers, to as accurately as possible be formed and curved similar to what the demand looks like. If you do that, you will have the minimal number of cars that can supply that demand at a very low ETA while keeping those cars full. And that means that their economics, the euros per hour that they make, is far better than what they can make in a taxi or in some other sort of mode of transportation, while keeping the customers really happy. And that means you can bring prices down, and it also means you can pay drivers more.
Yeah. It's just one of those extraordinary examples of how very complex things going on under the surface just make life that little bit more pleasurable.
Sure.
We're going to talk actually about that with our next guest too. I'd like to invite on the stage Chris Barton, who's one of the co-founders and on the board of Shazam. Okay, so music is something music is one of the. I mean, for me, I don't get particularly excited about art galleries. I think music is really the art form that speaks to everybody most deeply. And there's pretty much nobody who doesn't get excited about some kind of music. And the ability to kind of identify, discover, and then purchase things. I mean, it sounds ridiculously simple, but it's pretty transformative for people. It's this amazing thing that you just we talked a little bit about this, the engineering, the architecture behind this service. I guess the question that I always want to know about Shazam is how the hell does it work?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit too complex to explain the details, but essentially it comes down to spectral peaks.
Spectral peaks.
Yes, and actually spectral peaks are a characteristic not only of music, but a characteristic of recorded sound, or all sound. So Shazam's technology, when we invented it, it was basically, we realized after we invented it, we were trying to conquer music recognition, and we realized, well, we've actually conquered recorded sound recognition. So now today you can also Shazam TV content, TV ads, anything. One day you could potentially Shazam radio content, anything that's actually recorded and can be included in a database.
Okay, and presumably the record companies love you, right? I mean, I know that you're now on the board, so you don't speak for the company on a day-to-day basis, but the record companies must love Shazam, right?
Yeah, Shazam is announced they're driving about $300 million of digital sales per year. So it's driving, and if you think about it, when you use Shazam, I like to think that when I buy music, sometimes it's a band that I know I want to buy. I like Coldplay and I like Elbow and so on. But I think a lot of the purchases that occur in Shazam are truly incremental to what people are already buying. Someone's sitting in a bar and they think, what's that? And then they buy it.
There's this amazing Japanese word that I can't now remember, which effectively is like Japanese for owning a Kindle. It's the word for buying a lot of books and never reading any of them. And I've forgotten it now. But the thing about music is it's slightly different, isn't it? People buy a lot of music, but they tend, because you can listen to music while you're doing other stuff. The larger people's music libraries get, just the more music they listen to, right? Have you noticed any interesting kind of changes in consumption habits, now that pretty much everybody has this software?
Yeah, I think, Shazam is always trying, and in the same way that Travis at Uber is trying to get cars to wherever you are, I think Shazam is always trying to get the music wherever you are. And the music wherever you are is a very large amount of music. I mean, if you think about a big music collection years ago was a set of bookshelves with a few hundred CDs or records. Now a big music collection is 20 million songs on Spotify. So actually, I did the calculation last night. If you listened to 10 hours a day to music and never heard the same song twice, it would take you 270 years to listen to Spotify.
I'd like to bring on another entrepreneur now who's dealing with another of those big human issues. It's pregnancy, in fact. And so I'd like to welcome to the stage Hans's co-founder, Ida Tin. You're looking wonderful this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, now this is not a subject that touches me directly, but perhaps you could talk us just briefly through how you arrived at what you're doing right now, and then just explain briefly what it is that what your product does, right?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, maybe to just say that fertility is actually much more than getting pregnant. It really starts when a young woman have her first period, and then it goes into years of maybe not wanting to get pregnant, then motherhood perhaps, then other years of not getting pregnant, another child, and then all the way to menopause. So it's really this life journey. And what we're doing is we have built an app. So it's a cycle tracking app to help women keep track of this important part of their lives that goes on for years and years and decades and decades.
I'm gonna have your colleague come on now and just explain a little bit about the version of the app that you're releasing today.
Right.
It's Mike LaVigne, isn't it?
It is Mike LaVigne.
Mike LaVigne. Could we please welcome Mike LaVigne?
Hi, Berlin. So you might wonder why me, a guy, has designed a fertility app for women, and I think it's a very fair question. It's a question I've asked myself. It's a question I asked Ida and Hans before I joined the team. And I started to think about it in context of everybody's really touched by fertility in a very real way, a very, very real way. And I had a story to tell around that. So that's not me. But that is the same car that I drove on my first errand when I got my driver's license when I was 16 in the US. And the first errand that I was allowed to drive was to go buy pads and tampons for my mom and sister when they were having their period and they didn't want to go out of the house. So I went out and did that, and that was not really a big deal for me because my mother was a nurse. We talked about this sort of thing, and I feel like it's one of the topics that is kind of taboo, that we're not really allowed to talk about. And I thought, this is something that I actually know quite a bit about. So when I think about designing this app, which I'll be showing you in just a bit, I think about designing for the women that I love. So I think about the people that are in my life that I want to design for, and that includes my sister and all of my friends who are here, actually. Part of that process was having a lot of discussions with women about some very intimate details of their cycle, and I think a lot of them are here. Thank you for that. We also had over 700 beta users who've been using our app for the past 6 months, and I've had a lot of conversations with them as well. And I wanted to thank right now the beta users for participating for so long and providing so much detail and being so open about discussing this topic, especially with a guy. So we've also conducted, we partnered with a did a research study with a local university around the math of the science of what's happening around the cycle. We've had a lot of doctors involved from engineering backgrounds to hormonal experts and then also fertility experts as well. There are hundreds of research papers that we've gone through, and 30 of those are actually included in the app, or links to them are included in the app, so you can kind of see the background. And of course, all of this is driving the algorithms. So this really is, Clue is your app. So it's the app for women. It was informed by them. It's designed for you, for the people that I've spoken to. And it's also customized. Something that's different about the app that we've created is that it's based around the algorithms of your cycle, of the individual woman's cycle. So it's not based off of the math of the masses, it's based off the math of you. The interesting part is that when I started looking at the competitors, and this is kind of what the competition looks like, and most of it is, you wouldn't think that maybe this is all from, that you might think that this is all from one app, but actually these are many different apps, and they all have kind of a similar look and feel to them. And we decided that we really wanted to do something different because women weren't at all happy with the design treatment that they were getting from these apps. And so now I'll give you a peek of what that something different is. And are we seeing it? There we go. So this is Clue. And you can see that what we're seeing on the main screen here is this is the current cycle that's currently happening for a woman. And you can see that at this point of the cycle, she's somewhere in the middle of her fertile window, or actually, if we go here, she's after her fertile window. So you can see up at the top is where the period happens, and it curves around, and then there's the fertile window, and then coming back around to where PMS happens, and then the cycle repeats. So the first thing that you do when you launch the app on a day is that you come into the data entry. So what this is meant to do is for a woman to say, I'm going to select my mood. Maybe I'm happy because I'm at High Berlin. Maybe I'm sad because it's been so rainy outside. I can here now track sexual behaviors to see where it overlaps or where it doesn't with my fertile window. And we had some protected sex there. Coming back to the calendar, now what you're seeing on the calendar as well are the blue dots are representing our projections of where the fertile window may be, and then also the red squares are where the period is happening. So here you can identify different traits of like what's happening with the fertile window, with the period, maybe cramps, headache, like that. So we also have quite a bit of, as I was mentioning with the papers, we have quite a bit of educational content. Let's come back to the main page here. Now you can see, I don't know if you noticed, but now the data visualization has updated a little bit. And if we scroll around the wheel here now that you can see, we're getting information about when things are happening and what's coming up next. So by very quickly launching the app, a woman can come to the app and find out what's going on with her cycle. For more information, now we get into some of the research. Part of what we found in talking to all these women is that there's a lack of information, there's a lack of knowledge about what is actually going on in the body. So this is quite long text, but we also then have at the very bottom medical terminology, references to those papers that I was talking about. So by actually exploring this app, you can get a very good, very baseline information about what is going on with the fertility cycle, with your personal fertility cycle. So we come back here to today. Here we explain the averages. So this is how we actually do the math. I feel like something that a lot of apps don't do is they don't explain actually what they're doing with your data and how they're making use of it. And so here we go into a lot of information, again, referencing the research, the clinical research that all this is based on. So with that, we have an announcement that we can make, actually, which we're quite excited about. So this app is actually been sent into Apple, and it's in the process of being published. So it should be out in the market in probably just a couple weeks, which we're very excited about. We've been working on it for quite a long time, and we hope that you will use it. We hope that the beta users will continue to send feedback in. Please keep doing that. That's what's made this app so good. And we also hope, of course, that you'll tell your friends about it. But we hope that you will visit our website, sign up, and hopefully get an announcement of when we will be in the App Store ready for download. That's it. Thanks very much.
So, Ida, I have one question for you, which you probably know what I'm going to ask you. I happened to be watching the live stream of a conference called All Things D, and middlingly successful entrepreneur by the name of Max Levchin announced something rather similar. Could you explain why you're better?
So, first of all, I think it's amazing that somebody like him is taking this on. I think it's educating the market and investors, so I think that's excellent. What he's doing is working with the temperature method or looking at cervical fluid, and those are fine technologies, but really what we need is a breakthrough technology to develop a truly high-tech, accurate method for family planning so we can get way past the pill. He said it himself, he's not a hardware guy. I'm a hardware girl, and we are building this technology, and that's the big difference.
Thank you. Always,
he's also, he's not a design person, right? Like,
no, I have been to PayPal.
Right. I mean, yeah. I have too.
It's
a
still,
long time ago.
Just
and it's like if you just go math, but you don't bring the heart,
yeah,
that could be an issue too.
Yeah.
And I think if I can add just one brief thing, is that looking at the market for women desperately trying for a child, that's a very lucrative market. But really, what you want to do is take women by the hand from the onset of this journey and all the way through. So we want to develop a much longer relationship with our users, and I think that's also a very interesting market.
Thank you, thank you. So from travel through musical experience to pregnancy, there are a lot of big issues that technology is looking to fix. But what if an iPhone app could help you realize your human potential? It sounds almost absurd. But our next guest, Francis Pedraza from Everest, thinks that his startup can do just that. So I'm going to invite Francis up to come and explain what Everest is all about, please. So if I understand it correctly, it's like really, really posh pen and paper for iPhone. You kind of like track what you want to do and make a record of it like you would do in a journal, right?
Except you don't do it in a journal, and you can't do a lot of the stuff that our app can do in a journal. Pen and paper are really limited. Yeah.
So talk me through. We were having a conversation the other day, and you mentioned that that you see achieving life goals as kind of the new, effectively the next evolution of social networking, right? Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. So what is business? Businesses create supply to meet demand. So you have to have a model of demand, a way of thinking about human wants and needs. And I think that the best way to understand the economy and the opportunities that exist within it is through Maslow's pyramid of his hierarchy of human needs. So he had a pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramid, you had basic human needs for food, water, shelter, survival, the means to continue survival, and to continue basic comfort. And so in the modern economy, that includes things like getting from point A to point B, and includes things like your app, which is about sort of your basic needs. And then there's the middle of the pyramid. In the middle of the pyramid, Maslow said once people have their basic needs met, they move on to meeting their social needs. And social needs include things like recognition, connectedness, love, respect, friendship, intimacy. And I think in the last 10 years, there's been an explosion of businesses, of startups, that are creating supply to meet demand for social needs. The biggest winner is Facebook. Facebook created a social network that defines us all by who we know, and it addresses the middle of the pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, you have a set of needs around self-actualization. Maslow recognized that once we have our basic and our social needs met, what are we going to do with our life? We're going to do things like we're going to seek self-actualization, which means we're going to want to learn new things, have new experiences, travel to new places. We're going to want to express ourselves creatively. And so the basic idea is that if Facebook built a social network that defines people by who they know, with Everest we're trying to build an action network that defines them by what they do and what they want to do in the future. And I think that if we can give people the tools and community they need to address those needs at the top of the pyramid, that's going to be really valuable.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. Can you sort of sketch out what are the strategies that this? I mean, we all know about like Facebook being kind of furiously addictive. They do this A/B testing to kind of like make it as sticky and addictive as possible, so they can serve you up more ads and that kind of thing. And it's it's one of those websites impossible to pull yourself away from. Their primary objective seems to be to get you to stay there a long time. You have slightly different goals, but do you use some of the same sort of persuasive strategies in your design work?
Yes. So Facebook is incredible at inducing dopamine, and it's because I often check Facebook almost first thing in the morning because I know there's going to be a little red circle and it's going to have notifications, and those notifications are people who are commenting on my stuff, they're liking my stuff, they're interacting with me, and so that's the reward that I get, and that's why it drives me to compulsively check my my Facebook page, and in a similar way, on Everest, if you've got a dream to become an amazing chef and you cook and you add a step that you cook and you capture your moment, you want to receive the same sorts of validation. You want other people to encourage you, say, way to go, that's amazing. You want to know that if somebody saw what you did and decided to do something similar, that you inspired them. You want to know that other people are interested enough in what you're doing that they might want to suggest a step to you. So there's interactions on Everest, and they're different than interactions on Facebook. They're all around the things that you're doing. But in the same way that Facebook is addictive, like we're trying to build an app that is like a really compelling thing that you use every day, and a lot of it is about the interactions between people. And it's also, I mean, what makes a game like one of the Zynga games addictive is also good game mechanics. So if you've gone on a streak and you've completed 10 steps this week on Everest, like we should say, way to go, we're going to build a statue for you, Hercules, you're the best. Creating that sort of an emotional experience through the product is really important.
So you're effectively trying to manipulate people into making their own lives better.
We're trying to get people into self-improvement.
Yeah. Make it fun. Make it easy. Yeah.
No, it's terrific. Thank you very much. That's all we have time for. Thank you very much to my guests. Thank you so much. We're going to head over there.